By contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is
faithfulness.
Being faithful to God is perhaps the most obvious promise that Christians make on a day-to-day basis, but I would like to argue that it is also the most challenging. Being faithful means staying true to God's word. It means believing in something we cannot see, and it means trusting in something that is often unexplainable and goes beyond the scope of our human knowledge. The story that immediately comes to mind for me when I think about faithfulness is the story of a man called Job. Job was a wealthy man, he had a large family, he had extensive flocks, and he was always doing good and glorifying God. In fact, when God was confronted by Satan, God boasts of Job's goodness and loyalty towards him. Satan argues that Job is only faithful because God has blessed him abundantly, and believes that if God allowed Satan to punish Job, he would turn away from God immediately. So, the next day, Job receives news that his livestock, servants, and all 10 of his children have passed away. He mourns the loss of his family, but he still prays to God. Satan decides to test him again and gives Job horrible skin sores. Job begins to think that he has been wicked and is being punished for his actions. His wife and all of his friends are telling him to blame God rather than himself, but he doesn't listen. After finally encountering God himself, Job realizes that God's power and love are greater than any hardship he's faced, and he accepts the limitations of his knowledge. Because Job remained faithful and loyal to God, God returns Job's health, provides him with twice the property and wealth that he had before, and even blesses him with more children. Job was presented with every reason to abandon his faith and to blame God for his misfortunes. But instead, he endured, and he remained confident in God's reliability. Job remained faithful to God because he remembered the promise God made to be faithful to us. In today's world, faithfulness seems to be such a vanishing virtue. It has become all too common to change jobs, change homes, change brands, etc. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's completely normal to change jobs or move to a different house or a different city. And you're right, it is normal. In fact, it's even healthy, expected, good. Nothing is truly permanent, but that's where I disagree. Your faithfulness to God may not always be permanent, but the good news is that God's faithfulness towards us is and will always be permanent. His faithfulness towards us is so much greater than anyone can imagine, and it is unmatchable by any earthly being. God's faithfulness to us is truly a gift. When we think about the people in our life that we love most, we rarely describe them as faithful. We use words like loyal, constant, reliable, but all of these words together encompass the idea of faithfulness. When Paul wrote about the fruits of the Spirit and decided to include faithfulness, I think he wanted us to realize that faithfulness has to do with our character. It's about being committed, demonstrating integrity, and showing a strong and consistent character. I think he wanted us to realize that being faithful is not necessarily describing how we are, it's describing how God is to us and how God is calling us to be towards one another.